Couple of reasons is we'll have this. If y'all want to go back and review, I'll just put it up to YouTube after each of our weekly sessions. And that way, if y'all want to refresh or something that you want to review, you go back and have access to that as well. But it's good to see you all and good to continue our discussion through conducting an effective meeting with correct parliamentary procedure. And tonight we're going to get into some real nuts and bolts of parliamentary procedure and the basics of that, and then we'll get into some more advanced motions throughout the evening. So just like any other session that y'all sit in, if y'all have questions along the way, feel free to raise your hand, type it in chat, or just put me at a stop. We will finish again before 8 o'clock this evening, and we'll take a break somewhere halfway through, or if y'all feel like you need a break before then, just take one or let me know, and we'll make that accommodation for us as well. Before we get started, though, Robert, you weren't able to join us last week, and I did receive your email, and I appreciate that. If you want to just introduce yourself to the group a little bit, and what we did last time was we went through a little exercise to just tell us a little bit about our backgrounds and maybe why you're in this class and what you might want to gather from this class. Robert, we'll let you introduce yourself to the group, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Robert Overall. I teach, and I have been the past chair of our faculty senate at my institution. I remember I watched you all's recording from last time, so I'm a Middle Tennessee boy. I have never lived outside except for about a 6-month period, I haven't lived outside of Tennessee my entire life. As I said, I was the chair of the Senate 3 times actually, and every time learned new ways to mess it up, I'm sure. But there's been a call for me to possibly do that one more time before I retire. If you can't see, I'm kind of gray. The short version of why I'm in the class is I'd like to do it even a little better this time. So if that comes to bloom. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Robert. I'm glad you're part of this group, and hopefully you'll get some pointers and tips. My goal is for everyone to just take away a few items that can help them be better leaders in meetings and better participants in meetings, and not to come out being an expert in every aspect of parliamentary procedure, but hopefully you'll pick up some pointers along the way and some ideas that can help you as far as looking up some topics and different things. Before we get into what I've got for us this week with the parliamentary procedure, Amy, I want to go back to some of the questions that you asked last week, and I'd sort of put those in my parking lot. You had asked a couple of things that I wasn't real familiar with, so I took a few minutes and looked up some answers that might help you. And you can refresh me if I didn't take good notes. But you were talking about some recordings of the meetings that you're a part of, and one-person consent was a term that you used, and I wasn't real familiar with that. Is that sort of what your question was about as far as recording and using that in terms of a secretary?
Like, as long as I give my consent, I can go ahead and, I think I thought that was what I felt like one of our lawyers on our, because we had people were just worried that we were gonna record and publish. And that was never our goal. It's just for me to basically, as the secretary of the meeting or the minute taker, I usually I replay that. Some meetings are 6 hours plus. So I think that as long as you make that announcement, I thought that was sufficient enough, that my own consent is enough, but I just wanted to be 100% sure.
Okay, and you serve as secretary in that role, and you are in the meeting, so it's not being recorded for you to transcribe later then. Is that what I'm gathering?
Yeah, I'll eventually, I'm not taking it during the meeting, really. I'm doing everything else too.
Sure.
I'm awarding food and
Sure.
making
So I
coffee.
looked up
Yeah.
both of those topics because I just wanted to cover them. And this is for everyone. As far as the minimums and the basics to having a deliberative assembly or a group meeting, we do have to have a chairman, president, whoever the presiding officer is, and we have to have that secretary, whether it's the person who serves in whatever role their title might be. There needs to be a recording secretary who is in the meeting and performs that duty of writing down what occurs in the meeting. So I wasn't clear if you were there, but it's not a good practice to only have a recording without having the secretary in person. And I looked up the answers, and I didn't send you all this book, but I will reference it tonight. Let me hold it up, and you're not going to be able to see. This is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, the 11th edition. Robert's giving me a big thumbs up. This is the large, unabridged version. It's 700 plus pages long. This is the official parliamentary novel for most organizations who use Robert's Rules of Order. So when I looked that up, Amy, one thing that I found, and it does talk about recording devices in Robert's Rules of Order. And it does mention that it is not a parliamentary rule, but it could be a standing rule of the group. So you would have to delve into your bylaws, policy, constitution to see if it mentions recordings and if they're allowed. But if not, the way you could handle that would be through just a simple motion or unanimous consent. Are there any objections to the meeting being recorded today? If none, then the meeting will be recorded. Or if there are objections, it can be put to a vote by the group with majority rules. So even if just one person didn't want to participate, then if the majority overruled them, it could be recorded. And I refer to page 471 because I like to have documentation when I look up things for groups. And so I'm just going to give you all an example of how I use the book. So I looked up recording devices, and it mentions on page 471, the use of the secretary of a recording device can be of great benefit in preparing the minutes, but a transcription from it should never be used as the minutes themselves. So Amy, it sounds like what you're doing is exactly correct. So you have the transcript there to help you in preparing the minutes. And as long as the group does vote to have it recorded, then you're on the right track. That clear that up, make you feel better, or confuse you totally, or?
That's fine. Yeah. That's pretty much, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything wrong. Cause there's times I have to step out of the room and
Sure.
And if I'm not ever going to publish those
Right.
Meetings. I'm just doing it.
Exactly. They're there for the benefit of helping the secretary get everything worded correctly. Okay. Yes, Robert.
Just as a quick aside, and I'm not clear who everybody's associated with except for you, Michael. Just to put this in, there's also a piece in Tennessee legislation that's called the Sunshine Law that can apply to certain types of organizations where you're free to record it without anybody's, I'm not sure how you do it without the recorder's consent, but you're free to do it without anybody's consent, depending on the organization we're talking about.
Sure, absolutely. And that gets into some other bits and pieces that really aren't covered under parliamentary law, but under government law. So very good. And I do apologize, Robert. I meant to take just a brief moment. We did introduce ourselves last week, but y'all just real quickly go through and tell Robert, sort of your goals in this group and what group you're associated with if you'd want to. So Amy, you want to go first? You're at the top of my screen.
Sure. Well, I'm Amy Campoli, Executive Assistant to the CEO for Tennessee Medical Association. We're a nonprofit professional association for physicians in Tennessee. We've been around since 1830 and pretty much do things the way that they were done in 1830. I mean, it's very archaic. I think I said last time we have a Speaker of the House, we have a House of Delegates. If they could probably get away with the powdered wigs, they probably would. It's our president-elect currently is a very big stickler for Robert's Rules of Order. And he looks to me as acting secretary of the meeting to jump into his rescue when he's trying to shoot down something or, a point of order. So I usually keep my book at my desk, but it's such a thick book that I tried reading it, but I just don't have it in me. So I decided to take this course. So that's about that.
Thank you, Amy. Do you have a version of the full edition of Robert's Rules of Order for
It's smaller. But it's definitely, it's the newest one that took over 2016. I think I had it. There was another version that was out prior to that, and that one replaced it. But mine's smaller for sure.
You want the one that's 700 plus pages if they were asking you to do that, because it's got a lot of references. It's got and the way I use it, and we're going to get into this, is use that appendix in the back and find that particular topic and go to it. There's no way to try to memorize the whole book, but it's a good resource to, just like when I looked at that recording device thing, it was here in 2 different pages, and that gave the answer that I was looking for you. All right. Thanks. All right, Charles, you're next on my screen.
Okay. I am retired from Metro Schools. I will be assuming the position of president in July. And that's my main purpose for taking this course.
And that's president of is it the Retired Metro Teachers Association? Is that right, Charles?
Yeah, Metro Nashville Retired Teachers Association, yes.
Very good.
Charles, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Do I remember correctly that you're from Lebanon, Tennessee?
I am.
I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy. I actually graduated from Cass Heights Military Academy, let's say 500 years ago.
I'm from Lebanon. It's out there for about 13 years before coming to Metro.
Very good. We've made a connection. Very good. All right, Ben.
Hello, Robert. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Crawford. I'm a commercial real estate agent here in town. Lived here for 5 years. I wish I could say I had the cool backgrounds like you guys, with your boards and whatnot. But, just looking to pick up a new skill set and, just improve on life. So here I am.
Yeah.
Very good, Ben. And if you let folks know that you've got a little knowledge and practice in parliamentary procedure, they'll be looking to use that skill in a lot of different areas as you go through your different organizations in your career and things.
What I'm finding is a lot of real estate owners also own businesses and on board members and things. So just to be able to speak that lingo and, like I said, have that skill set, just.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you deal much with homeowners associations, but they have a lot of questions that I get. I've worked with several folks who've had issues with homeowners bylaws and different things and want some clarification and answers. Homeowner associations and churches have been the 2 biggest groups that asked me questions over the years, parliamentary wise.
And that was another inspiration for me taking it, the HOA.
Yes. So, and just as an aside, and I was going to mention this next week, it'll be our final class, but as y'all work through your personal professional lives and you come into situations where you might have questions or want some clarification, I don't mind at all helping you all out. Just drop me an email, give me a phone call. If you say, hey, we've got this going on with our homeowner association group, someone's trying to pass this law, this rule, this motion, or whatever, and I'll be glad to, if you can send me some information to read through it and point you through some clarification from Robert's Rules of Order. Because that's what I always try to rely on. I never rely on my opinion. Personally, I always back it up with what I find in the book. To let that be my guiding rule. All right, well, we'll get started with tonight's session. Again, this is the parliamentary procedure aspects. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared. Y'all give me a thumbs up if you can see The slideshow. All right, very good. This mouse is very sensitive as I scroll through the slides. That's my reminder to record. And again, we are just continuing on with our second session of how to conduct an effective meeting. We talked about several items last week, including the minutes, which I think is one of the most overlooked and important details that we covered last week, are the things that go on the minutes and the things that don't necessarily need to, because we need to keep those concise and accurate as possible. And we talked a little bit about the function of a chairman and how we work in groups and teams. Well, tonight we're going to talk about parliamentary procedure. Now, I've got the red sports car on there to start us out with, because several years ago, when y'all were like me and we were teenagers, most of us had a big desire to get a driver's license. And when we envisioned getting that driver's license, we were thinking about cruising around Friday night in a good looking sports car riding the town. Well, for some of us, it worked out that we didn't get that red sports car. We ended up with the sedan or a wagon or an old pickup truck or whatever. And the reality kind of set in. But what you did learn from all that was how to drive a car, which is the important thing. And it doesn't matter what car you're in, you know how to drive it. So the correlation I have between the cars and what we're going to do this evening is it doesn't matter what organization you're in. I want you all to pick up some skills, some knowledge of parliamentary procedure that you can use in small groups, large groups, whatever groups you're associated with, again, as a member and as a leader of that group. And hopefully you'll be one of the more, not necessarily educated, but up-to-date members on parliamentary procedure. As I mentioned last week, this isn't a difficult topic to learn, but most of us just don't have a lot of experience. There's not a lot of opportunities to pick up this training. You know, we could all be surgeons if we went to the right schooling long enough and learned how to do that. We can all be parliamentarians if that's what you choose to study and learn. And we get into a lot of different groups that don't have a competent parliamentarian. Maybe the leader's not real good at parliamentary procedure, and that can lead to some meetings that go awry and we may not be doing things correctly. So it's good to have a little bit of knowledge where you can help guide that group. So as we get into parliamentary procedure, we're going to go over just a few of the basics, and then we're going to go through several of the motions tonight, and I'll explain to you the purpose and the rationale behind them, and also how to use that book as a reference and a resource. So just as an overview, with parliamentary procedure, it helps to enforce our rules of democracy. You know, living in our country where we have a democratic type government, most of our societies and associations that we work with go off that same basis of democracy. There are some commonly accepted ways to do the following: present ideas, to discuss how we're going to take action on those, and then make decisions. And in all decision-making bodies, we have some form of rules that we follow. Now, for most of our organizations, it's typically Robert's Rules of Order. When we get into some government bodies, they have their own set of rules, but they're also based off the premise of Robert's Rules of Order. And one of those ideas is that the majority rules. So everyone gets to vote that's allowed in that group if they're a member, if they're a participant, and then the majority makes the decision. All right. Whoops. Now, before we get into that, Robert's Rules of Order is a book that was written by a man who was in the military. His name was Henry M. Martin. He was in the U.S. Army, and this was back in the 1800s. Now, he made his way across the country, and he sat in on several meetings, and he found a common theme in all those meetings, that they were run differently. There was not a lot of cohesion in them. There were different rules for different meetings, and not many rules were being followed, there was a lot of confusion going on. So as he traveled the country, he took a lot of notes and he started putting some words down to make sense out of how to conduct a meeting. And with his military background, that helped him come up with this standard, this way of conducting meetings. So he authored his first book in the 1890s called Robert's Rules of Order. And that has been through 11 revisions now. And that is the standard that we use in most of our organizations. So these rules have been around for a long time. And next week, we'll talk some about electronic meetings and things, because you can imagine when he wrote this in the 1890s, he didn't think about recording devices and electronic meetings. So they do have some updates from time to time that they add in to take in consideration technologies. But a lot of it is still pretty old rule that has been around for a long time. And it does help for the meetings to flow and to make sense, and for democracy to have its chance to rule with the majority rule. So that's where the name Robert's Rules of Order comes from. It was named after the man who wrote the book, Henry Robert, who was, again, a U.S. Army military man from way back in the 1800s. Oops. The basis of parliamentary procedure is the main motion. A main motion presents an idea in front of the group, which is basically new business. Now, there are several rules that go along with the main motion. For example, we can only have one motion at a time. And when there's a motion in front of the group, we call that being on the floor. So it belongs to the group and we're discussing it, or whatever part of it we're on, we say that motion, while it's active, is on the floor. So that's a term that you'll hear a lot. You can only have one main motion at a time. Now, once we finish that, it's done. Then we can have another main motion, but there can only be one at a time. It does require a second. A second means that we have at least two people in the group who are in favor of talking about it. Now, the person who makes the main motion, they should be in favor of voting for the main motion. The person who seconds it does not necessarily have to be in favor of the motion. They may want to second it just so we can discuss it. They may want to amend it or do something else to it. But the person who seconds a main motion does not have to vote in favor of it when it comes to a vote. It is debatable, meaning that we can have discussion on it, for or against it. Some motions we will learn tonight are not debatable, meaning we cannot discuss them, and they would then go to an immediate vote. It is amendable. That's another way we distinguish motions, or one of the characteristics, is if we can amend it. Now, to amend means to change. So, for example, if I have a main motion that our group should buy a red car, someone could move to amend that to say, I move to amend red car to say blue car. And then we could discuss if we're going to buy a blue car instead of a red car. And if that motion to amend passes, then the main motion would then state that we're going to buy a blue car. If the motion to amend failed, we would be back on the main motion discussing that we were still buying the red car. So amend means to change. There are several motions that can be amended, not just the main motion. We will learn also tonight that motions have rank to them. Some are more important than others, and the main motion is the lowest ranking motion of all the others. That also means that if there is any other business on the floor, a main motion may not be made at that time. It can only be made when there is nothing else pending in front of the group on the floor. So those are some of the main characteristics of a main motion. Again, this is the motion that is used most often. This is the one that brings up new business, that we're going to buy a car, we're going to have a fundraiser, we're going to limit how many trees you can plant in front of your house. All those different things are done through a main motion. Yes, Robert. You're muted.
Sorry, this may be obvious, but to go back to your car example, if you've made a motion for a red car and I amended it to a blue car, at that point, you could vote against the amendment. But if the amendment passed, you could end up voting against your original motion, couldn't you?
Correct. If you were the person who made the motion that we buy a red car and then it got amended, then yes, you could vote against your own main motion. Now, if it goes through and it's never touched or changed, then you are obligated to vote for your own main motion.
I've already learned one thing tonight. Thank you.
Now, these are the steps to making a main motion. These are and this is where it gets very formal when we're conducting parliamentary procedure and following Robert's Rules of Order, that we hold to this standard and this guideline, and that all discussion goes through the chairman, that we don't have 4 people talking at one time and things like that. So if there's nothing else pending on the floor, we're in the part of the meeting that's probably new business, or the business part of the meeting. And the chairman would say, is there any business to come before the group? You know, a member, Ben, could say, Mr. Chairman. Now, unless it's a small committee meeting, we typically want them to raise their hand, somehow designate that, hey, it's me, Ben, over here talking, so it gets the chairman's attention. So that's the purpose of rising and addressing of the chair. So it does garner the chair's attention, so I'll know who's talking, and I can then give that person permission to speak, or basically give them the floor. In small groups where we all know each other and it's kind of informal, I could address Ben as Ben, Mr. Crawford. If it's a little bit larger group, I may not know everyone's name. It would be best to say Mr. Speaker or Madam Speaker, and address the individual in the group as Mr. or Madam Speaker. At that point, they have gained recognition from the chair. So now, after the chairman says, Mr. Speaker, then the speaker has the opportunity to make their motion. You don't just rise up saying, Mr. Chairman, I move to buy a red car. You have to wait permission to speak. So once Ben has risen, addressed the chair, he gets recognition from the chair, he can make his motion. At that point, as chairman, I would ask for a second. And someone in the crowd could just say, I second the motion. They do not have to gain recognition. I do not have to know their name. We learned last week in the minutes. Just someone can say, I second the motion. At that point, it is the responsibility of the chairman to restate the motion in front of the group. And this is where it gets kind of confusing at times, especially in some of our smaller, more informal groups, where we might have a lot of discussion before a motion's actually made. And we've talked about 6 different things, and maybe we should buy a truck or a car or a blue car or a red car. And then Ben finally makes a motion that we buy a red car. Now, it's really important at this juncture for the chairman to restate the motion. And the way I would do that, I would say, it has been properly moved and seconded that we buy a red car. And when that comes from the chairman, that should signal to everyone, this is what we're talking about. This is what the main motion is. And again, we do get a lot of preliminary discussion before people make motions, and that's where confusion gets in. How many of you have been in a meeting before where they say, what are we voting on? What are we talking about? Because they get so confused about all the other things we've already talked about. So it's a real key for the chairman, Charles, you're shaking your head, yes, to really have control of this and to know what that motion is, and to keep the group sort of harnessed so we know where we're going. The second reason we want to restate that motion is so the secretary understands what to write down, what this motion is. Remember also last week we mentioned that it's not important to put in the minutes what all the different discussion is. You could just simply put down there was discussion on this motion. You don't have to write down what everybody said. So as I restate the motion, that makes it clear to the secretary or whoever's writing down, this is the motion before the group. This is what needs to go into the minutes. After I've restated the motion has been moved, because that's how we make a motion. We move, I move. The motion has been moved and seconded that we buy a red car. Is there any discussion? The reason I asked for discussion, this is a main motion. It is debatable and it can be amended. So at that point, if Ben would like to raise his hand, or if he stands up, says, Mr. Chairman, Ben gets the first chance to talk because he made the motion. If I know that there's going to be some controversy about this motion and I've got people on both sides, as a fair chairman, I'm going to try to alternate back and forth between those for it and those against it to give them an opportunity to speak. We'll learn more about that when we get into the rules of debate. But as we go through the discussion part of it, as it begins to wind down as chairman, if I don't hear any further person in the group asking for permission to speak, then I can say, hearing no further discussion, we will proceed to vote. Voting is called the question. Someone doesn't necessarily have to yell question out in the crowd. We don't have to have the motion to move the previous question. It's just if discussion has stopped, as chairman, I can notice that and say, if there's no further discussion, and then I'll pause to give a chance for that discussion, we will proceed to vote. Then as chairman, I want to repeat that motion. All those in favor of the motion that we buy a red car, please raise your right hand. And I'll count the votes. All those opposed to the motion that we buy a red car, I'll count the votes. Again, the majority wins. So if there's more people in favor, I will say the ayes have it. The motion to buy a red car passes. Or the ayes, if we did a voice vote, those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Or if we voted by hands. Either way we vote, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Once I announce the result of the vote, that matter is over. It is finished. And then we proceed to the next item on our agenda, whatever that might be. But those are the steps, the proper steps in making a main motion. If there is one of the most important things I would like for y'all to gather out of our time together, it would be this slide right here, the steps to making a main motion and following through with them. Because I see so many different instances in groups where we don't necessarily follow through on the fundamentals of capturing this. And this is the basics of parliamentary procedure, is the main motion. We're going to talk about it some more later on. But are there any questions before we move on from the main motion? Robert.
I'm going to bet you're going to cover this, but just in case, if I'm the chairman and the discussion goes longer than I am comfortable with because of our time, because of our agenda, is there a proper way to cut that off? Are you going to cover that later or something else?
We're going to cover that later. All right, we'll move forward. A couple of you, I didn't get your address yet. Y'all email me your address, your mailing address. For those of you that I did get an address this week, I've mailed a book. And Amy, I think it may be a book that you shared with us last week that you already had. Let me stop. Let me go back. One second. Maybe not. Well, we'll do it in a minute. I was going to try to show you a picture, but since I got my screen shared, I can't do it. But I mailed out a Robert's Rules of Order in Brief book, which is a good little guide on how to conduct a meeting. It's broken down into chapters about you're going to a meeting, how to do some nominations and elections. It is not the big book. This is a small 100-something page book, but it does bring up some good topics. And I also mailed out a list of motions sheet, and I'll have it on the slide here in a few minutes. But these are some of the more common motions, and you can find these in several different venues outside of Robert's Rules of Order. There's a lot of accessibility on the internet, but motions are ranked. Some of them. Privileged, subsidiary, and main motions are ranked motions. There's a ton of other motions that we're not going to get into in this class, but these are ones that we want to talk about because they do have a lot of importance and a lot of effort that is put into them in several meetings. So if we were ranking them, we're going from left to right. So privileged are the highest ranking motions, and there are only 5 privileged motions. We're going to discuss those tonight. Then we have a group of motions called subsidiary motions. Subsidiary motions help the group to deal with a main motion. These all apply to a main motion. They are also ranked in importance. And then down at the bottom of the list, as we mentioned earlier, is the main motion. So we're going to talk about all these motions tonight as we get into each of them individually. But I wanted to bring that up to you right now to sort of guide our path that we'll be getting into. Now, the next couple of slides that I have for you. So learning a main motion is important. So think about it like this. If I were teaching you how to bake a cake and I showed you how to measure ingredients, there are several more steps in baking that cake, correct? We've got to mix the ingredients. We've got to know how to put it in the oven. We've got to know when to take it out and all that. So learning a main motion is just one part of it. Learning a main motion is learning how to read a measuring cup in a bakery. We've got a lot more to learn besides just the main motion for that cake to come out correctly. But it is probably the key ingredient is learning how to read that measuring cup. Because if you don't measure correctly from the beginning, it's not going to work out at all. Oops. Now, before we get into our motions, there's a couple of things that I want us to cover. And the first one is on voting. Now, I mentioned already that we could vote by voice and say aye or no. And we can also vote with a show of hands. So there are some different type of votings. But in order to know a couple of things, we have to be familiar with our organization's bylaws. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about bylaws, constitution, and organizational setup. But the bylaws should state who is allowed to be a voting member. In a lot of organizations, it could be just someone who has paid their dues, if there's dues involved, and they're a currently active member on the roll. In some larger groups that might be part of a co-op system or something like that, they may have 2 representatives who are voting members on the national board or something like that. So whatever the bylaws say is a person who's eligible to vote, then that's who's eligible to vote in that organization. The only people who are eligible to vote are the only ones that should be counted if we do have a vote on some type of motion or election. And the bylaws should note what type of majority vote, whether it's a simple majority or a 2/3 majority. You'll hear that term along the way, that especially out of Congress, if you watch C-SPAN or whatever channel, sometimes they talk about a supermajority or a 2/3 majority vote. And in parliamentary procedure, there are some motions that require a simple majority and some that do require a 2/3 majority. Now, voting methods. And these are kind of going from simplest to something that's more accurate. So the most simple, easiest voting method is a voice vote. We can do that very quickly. And that should be used in an instance where we kind of know how it's going to go already. It's something that everybody's in favor of. For example, if we were given a proclamation to the Girl Scouts because they, brought us cookies last month. So we want to really recognize them by having a proclamation. And we know everybody's going to be in favor of that. So someone makes a motion that this is the proclamation to recognize the Girl Scout troop. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed say no. It's one of those things that we know is going to pass. Now, if we were voting on the $2 billion Metro budget, we wouldn't do that with a voice vote. They have rules also that say that when they do vote on money things, that they have to have a counted vote, so we know who it is. But on those items that might be closer in terms of vote, or something that we wanted a more accurate count, there are more accurate ways to do it. So as we go up the hierarchy rank, we could have a rising vote, and that could be rising of the hand, which is difficult to do at times because I might raise my hand about my shoulder height, and I might raise my hand all the way above my head. So sometimes it's hard to count those votes. And I've done a lot of 4-H club meetings with kids over the years to know that if you ask them to raise their hand, they raise them in all different forms and fashion, and it's hard to count a hand vote. So the best way with a rising vote is actually have them stand up out of their chair. Now, you also have to be sensitive if you have folks in your group that do not have the ability to stand. That could be handicapped, wheelchair, different things. So keep that in mind too, and always, make an accommodations when you're doing that for those voting who can't stand. But a rising vote will give you an accurate way. And the most accurate way would be a secret ballot is mentioned. That's a lot of times that's used in elections where we may want to elect, we may have a ballot and we have everyone write down the name or check the name on a pre-printed ballot. The other one is a roll call vote. You'll see this a lot in government bodies, and they do that because they have a rule that says that they have to. It makes them accountable to their constituents to know exactly how they voted on a piece of legislation. Again, a lot of groups that when they get into budgets or spending money, they have to have a roll call vote to know if Charles voted, yes, we're going to spend this money, or Charles voted, no, we're not going to spend this money. Again, that's for some accountability to those in the group and different things like that. But the roll call vote would be the most accurate form. So you can see how it sort of goes up the line from a voice vote to a rising show of hands, and then ultimately to a roll call vote. Now, as a chairman, you can sort of gauge your group, know how large your group is, know the importance of what you're voting on. Again, if we're voting on spending $1 million on something, it would probably be wise to have a roll call vote to be sure we get it done correctly. If it's something that we know is going to pass and we're just speeding through the meeting, we can do that voice vote and move right on. Homeowners associations, different groups like that, business boards, sometimes have something called a proxy or a mail-in vote. We talked about quorums last week. We need to understand what our bylaws say about quorums and what it says about proxies and mail-in votes. It's very important. In order to have it, it has to be authorized in the bylaws. And it needs to say specific what it is, whether it's, absentee votes, email votes, fax votes, through regular mail, whatever that mail-in vote is, it needs to be outlined in the bylaws, and then the group needs to follow that bylaw specific to that when it comes to voting. A lot of times this is dealing with elections. You will see mail-in votes. Proxy is when someone has the power of attorney to vote for them. You'll see this a lot in business meetings, shareholder type meetings, things like that, where I've given Amy my proxy vote because I can't go to the shareholders meeting and I want her to vote this way for me. Some of those you might have multiple votes because you own 35 shares. So you might get 35 votes or something like that. But again, that needs to be outlined in the rules of the organization in their bylaws. Another one of our cute little cartoons. I don't like long division. I always feel bad for the remainders. As chairman, sometimes we might come across something called a division of the assembly, or it's a simple division. Now, what that means is someone wants a revote, not necessarily a recount, but a revote. So if we got into the red car main motion still, let's go back to that one. We'll use that as our example. And I took a voice vote as chairman. And I said, all those in favor of buying the red car, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. If you've ever been in an instance where people are opposed to something and there's a voice vote, you'll notice this phenomenon. When people vote yes for something, they simply say yes. When people vote no, they get very passionate about their vote. They want to yell it very loud. So it's hard to count no votes because people who vote no will scream no. The people that vote yes just simply say yes. So if we do have a difference of opinion in the group and we have yes and no's, it's very difficult to count because those no people, they yelled a lot louder than the yes people. Now, as chairman, it's my judgment call to think, did I have more yes people or more no people who yelled at me? So if I think I had more yes people, I can say the motion passes. If you are sitting in the group and you don't think that it did, you think that I misheard, you could say, Mr. Chairman, I call for a division of the assembly. What that means, that's requesting that we want a counted vote, not just a voice vote. And sometimes you see this in some government bodies where they're trying to pass some things through and the chairman says, okay, that's enough no's or yeses, and they just try to move on. You do not have to receive recognition from the chair. You can just say, Mr. Chairman, I call for a division of the assembly. And the chairman at that point immediately has to ask for another vote in a counted fashion. So this is one that you might possibly see, and I wanted you all to be aware of what it was and how it worked. Any questions about that? All right. Yeah, Robert?
And you said that the person raising that did not have to be recognized by the chair?
Correct. Correct. And the rationale behind that is if this is a situation where maybe the president or the chairman was trying to push something through and not listening to the whole assembly and thinking, you know, it's obvious that there were more no votes and yes votes, and he just announced that it's a yes, then you have the right to step and say, Mr. Chairman, I call for a division right then, and the chairman has to stop and recognize that. Otherwise, the chairman would just ignore that person and keep going if they had to gain recognition from the chair. So that's why that's built in that way. And before we get into our motions, let's talk a little bit about some debates, because we do have motions. Well, one of the descriptors that helps us tell different characteristics of motions is, can it be debated? We say it's debatable or undebatable, not debatable. And you'll see that in the little guide that I mailed you are attached to each of these motions. Now, what debate means, and it's obvious that's discussion. So the role of the chairman in debate is to enforce good decorum. Decorum means that we're being on our best behavior. You know, we're speaking in good terms as far as using appropriate language for the group. We're giving everybody a fair chance. And decorum is just the basic definition of how discussion should go. We're also moderating our time. We're keeping up with our speakers so that everyone gets an opportunity when it's their turn. And as chairman, I need to know a few of these Robert's Rules of Order throughout this discussion. Because if I'm presiding over the debate, I do ask for discussion on the motion. And when I ask for discussion, then that's when that motion is on the floor and everyone who has the right to vote has the right to discuss. Now, if we're in a large group and only board members are allowed to vote on something, but you've got a lot of other people in the peanut gallery watching, if they're not allowed to vote, they're not allowed to have discussion either. It would be similar to going to a city council meeting. When the city councilmen are having their discussion, the people in the audience don't get to have discussion with them unless they ask for an expert to come forward. Sometimes they have that where they allow them, or if it's one of those situations where we've had, one from a group to come forward and present facts about something. That's not really discussion on the motion. They are a fact presenter. So if I can't vote, I can't have debate. So that's something to be careful of. If you have people who are in a commingled group with some who are voting members and some who are not, only those who vote get to have discussion. And part of the discussion is to discuss the merits of the vote, and part of it's to try to persuade people to vote the way that you want them to vote. I think buying a red car is horrible. Red's an unlucky color. I think we should buy a blue car. Or I think red car is great. Every car I've ever owned was red. While I'm presiding over the debate, before someone can just jump and talk, again, it has to go through the chairman. So once I give that motion to the group, and the motion has been made and seconded that we buy a red car, is there any discussion? Everybody wants to talk, they might raise their hand or they stand up if that's the normal in the group. As chairman, I would say, Mr. Crawford, and then recognize him and let him speak. And when he's finished, I might say, Mr. Weir, and let him speak. And it could be a simple nod of a head, or the chair recognizes Mr. Smith. Again, it's how large is the group? How formal is it? Either way, that needs to go through the chairman's position for discussion. Because a lot of times when we start discussion, we get into these side talks and these side debates over in the corner, and the chairman needs to sort of have control over that as well and rein those in. And they can do it real tactfully, and that's part of the decorum. They could say, I think everyone has a lot of good points in discussion, but for the sake of everyone to get to hear all of these, let's have our discussion run through the chair. So if you would like to discuss, please raise your hand and everyone will get an opportunity one at a time. Please don't have any sidebar conversations, something like that. So once we've identified the speaker, here's who gets to speak first. And this is a ranking system. So the person who made the main motion, they get the first opportunity to speak. Now, if they don't jump up first, that's fine. But if they jump up 5 minutes from now, then they should be at the top of the list to get to speak next, because the person who makes the main motion has that right. Anyone who has not spoken yet on the motion gets to speak before someone else who has already spoken wants to speak for their second turn. And then we should try to alternate between those who are in support of a motion and those who are in opposition to the motion, if we know that already. Sometimes that's hard to understand or hard to know, but if you kind of have a background with the group and you already know that, hey, Joe, he only drives blue cars, I know he's not going to be in favor of a red car, so I might want to give him a chance to speak next. As far as the rules of debate and how long they should go, Robert, this will address some of your earlier questions. In Robert's Rules of Order, these are the rules. If your organization has different rules, they should be outlined in the bylaws. Otherwise, everyone has the opportunity to speak twice to a debatable motion, up to 10 minutes each time. So 2 times 10 minutes. Also, you cannot yield your time like they do in Congress. Congress, they have different rules. A lot of those deal with debate and discussion, but Robert's Rules of Order, you cannot yield your time. You know, if Robert's really passionate about this and he's on a roll, I can't say, well, I want to give my 10 minutes to Robert so he can speak for an extra 10 minutes. You cannot do that. Unless the bylaws stipulate, you know, we talk for 5 minutes on a motion or whatever.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yes, sir.
Because you're hitting on a topic that's I've got some history with. If we decide at this meeting that we're going to extend that 10 minutes to 15 minutes, we can't really change the meeting, can't change the rules for this meeting, can we? We have to change the rules for the next meeting.
No, we can change them for this meeting, for this motion, yeah. When we get into our motions later on, there's a motion called limit or extend limits of debate. And that's what it's for. And that might be an instance where if we know we're on a really tight schedule, you know, we have to finish our business day in 30 minutes. Well, again, Robert's Rules of Order is there to protect the rights of the minority and the rule of the majority. So as chairman, I can't say, hey, folks, we've got to go to lunch in 15 minutes. So we're going to only let the maker of the motion speak for 5 minutes and then everybody else gets 5 minutes to talk. You can't do that unless the group votes for that. Because as a democracy, everyone has the right to speak. Everyone has the right to vote. And the rights that they're given through this are 2 times each for 10 minutes, which is an extremely long time if you have a large group. And most discussion doesn't last that long unless it's a real passionate topic. And in that situation is even after we got into discussion, if we see that this is going to go on forever and ever, someone might make the motion to limit debate to, 30 minutes total, or the next 30 minutes, or only 1 time per speaker, or only 5 minutes per speaker. And then we'll vote on that. And if that passes, then we can limit that debate that way. Otherwise, that's the only way we can do that. Okay. And that's important too, because you don't know it as chairman. When Amy stands up to start talking about this topic, I don't set my stopwatch thinking that I've got to cut her off at 10 minutes because I just would have never imagined she's going to talk for 10 minutes about this issue. But if I see she's going for a while, I might start glancing at my watch saying, okay, she's already went a couple of minutes. I've got to cut her off at 10 minutes. So as chairman, if you don't want to let somebody go for 15, 20 minutes speaking about the merits of a motion, you're going to want to cut them off and say, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We must, really abide by and follow our rules of debate and decorum. And each speaker is allowed only 10 minutes for the times that they talk. So we're going to yield, ask you to go ahead and have a seat. And if anyone else has discussion, we'll give them an opportunity. Again, you always want to be as tactful as you can and be nice, but do enforce those rules as well. Oops. Okay. Oops. All right. Next. Now, this refraining from debate is if I'm the chairman. It's a little different in committees. We'll talk about committees next week. But in our large group meetings, if I'm the chairman, I should not be participating in debate. I am there to run the meeting, to be sure that it's fair for everyone participating. It gives a bad impression if the president or the chairman starts talking in favor or against a particular motion, because they probably have the power to persuade more than anyone else in the group since they have the chair. So if you must debate, if it's a hot topic that you've really got to talk on because you also are a voting member of this assembly and you paid your dues, then you need to step down from the chair and let someone else take over until this motion is completed. Because it's not fair for you to sit there and talk during the transaction of a motion for or against it. Now, if we're in a committee, it functions differently. If we're on the Budget and Finance Committee of the County Council, the chairman can talk just like everyone else. It has different rules of debate. They don't have as many limitations in committees, They don't have as much time limits. That's why committees are real important to the function of an overall organization, because that's where a lot of the work can get done, because they don't have as many rules of debate. And one topic we're not going to get into, but you might see this in some large assemblies, especially if we're on a hot topic and we're talking forever and we really need to talk about this. You know, maybe it's dissolving the organization or something like that that's real, real important and people are real passionate about. There is a function in Robert's Rules of Order that you can do that's called a committee of the whole, where we could vote to go into a committee of the whole meeting. And that would then open up discussion and debate pretty much infinitely, where people would have more than 2 opportunities in 10 minutes to talk. And so basically the whole group would be functioning as a committee with different rules. But it does require a motion and a vote for that to take place. And that would be a very, very rare opportunity that you might see that. It would have to be something very, very important, like we were talking about dissolving the association or something like that. But in most circumstances, outside of committees, the chairman does not need to speak during debate. One other item that comes up under discussion and debate, and we'll get into what's called an appeal from the decision of the chair. This has different discussion rules than the other motions, and that's why it's mentioned here. Now, appeal from the decision of the chair is a call for a motion that I think the chair has ruled incorrectly. For example, on a point of order or some parliamentary inquiry, and I have made what's called an appeal from the decision of the chair. And we're going to put it to a vote if the chair is correct or incorrect in their ruling of this. Now, in that situation, members only get to speak one time in debate. And in this situation, the chairman does get to speak during discussion, and they may actually speak twice. They can go first and they can go last to explain the reason that they did what they did. Basically is why they get to speak twice. So that's the exception to the chairman not being able to speak on discussion, except on the case of if we have an appeal from the decision of the chair. And then closing debate and voting. The chairman should never close debate if members are willing or if they're still desiring to speak in the time that is allotted. You know, if we haven't exhausted our limits of debate, discussion, people are still willing to talk, then they still have that opportunity to keep talking and to keep debating. The chairman can't just arbitrarily close it. Now, if it's obvious that people are done discussing, then the chair can close debate without a formal motion. Just like I mentioned earlier in our first example of a main motion. You know, we have a motion on the floor to buy a red car. I've asked for discussion, and I can see that the discussion has kind of stopped. So as chairman, I want to say, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote. So I've gave that last and final opportunity. I've gave that chance for anyone in the group to jump up, raise their hand, yell, say, hey, Mr. Chairman. And if I don't hear that, then I can take that as a form of unanimous consent that everybody is done discussing and we're ready to vote. Then I'm going to restate the motion that we're going to vote on. In my mind, I'm determining that method of voting. This is a simple yes, no vote. Do we need to have a counted vote? And you always call for both votes. If it's obvious that it's unanimous, you know, if we're voting to give out free water in the desert, and we've got the free water to give out, and we know that everybody's going to vote for it, I still have to call for the negative vote. So I say, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. You don't just say, all those in favor say aye. Well, it's unanimous. Motion passes. Because again, you could have a bunch of people in the back that y'all know a lot louder. You always ask for both votes, even if it's obvious. The chair determines the outcome and announces those results. The ayes have it, the motion passes. And then we move on to the next item of business on the agenda. Now, the role of the members in debate. You must be recognized by the chairman. The number of times you can speak, 2 times, 10 minutes each. You can only speak that second time if everyone else has already spoken once. You cannot request more time, and you cannot yield your time to another speaker unless your bylaws in your organization state that out specifically, or we pass a particular motion that limits or extends limits of debate. More rules about debate: committee reports, secondary motions, sessions that last more than 1 day. We're not going to get into that. And again, this is some of the decorum that we were talking about as chairman. You want to be a good listener, listen to the group. Be sure that people are focusing on the issue and not personalities. Stick to the issues and the facts of the issues. Don't question the motives. All remarks should go through the chairman. Address people with titles. Be as formal and be polite. So if Ben made the motion that we should buy a red car, and Amy jumps up and wants to speak during the debate and says, well, I don't think we should vote for this motion because Ben, he's just a bully and he tries to make motions every week that we buy a car. And Ben, he don't even know what he's talking about. You know, she is not discussing the merits of the motion. So as chairman, I have an obligation to say, Amy, would you please keep your remarks germane to the main motion itself? We don't want to use this as a personal attack ground. So I wouldn't say that part, but I would, you know, in Congress and in government, sometimes you see that, but this is not the place for that. So if that happens in your organization or your group, the chairman needs to be very tactful and very forward with it and say, thank you for your comments, but we do not need any personal comments. They need to be relevant to the main motion that we're discussing. So would you please keep if you have any comments about the main motion, you're welcome to make those at this time. Otherwise, we're going to move forward. And there's a word you'll hear used a lot called germane, and that means that it's relevant. All right. That brings us back to the steps of the main motion, and we're going to go ahead and take our short little break. Let's do about 5 minutes tonight, and I'll put the stopwatch on for us so y'all can see that. And so we'll come back in about 5 minutes.
Robert, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I was a goober, if that's what you're fixing to ask.
No, I was about to ask. Did you ever live in, did you live in Lebanon, or did you just attend Castle Heights?
Well, the short answer to the question is I lived near Lebanon. My father attended, my uncles attended, my grandfather attended. I bet you could feel a pattern in that.
Oh, yes. I was just shocked when you were saying, when you mentioned Lebanon.
Yeah, I don't know where you taught or if you taught in the Lebanon system. I actually attended elementary school at Byers Dowdy, which I guess is still functioning. I don't even know. And then I attended junior high, if memory serves me correctly. I think we were the first class at Walter J. Baird, if that rings a bell.
That's, yeah.
And then from there, I went to the academy.
My wife taught at Byers Dowdy. After we both taught in McLean School there on Lebanon, in the old building that used to be there on West Main Street.
On Main Street, yes, sir. I remember it. I've been to it.
We taught there until they moved the sixth graders over to Walter J. Baird into that building. I left there and went to Walter J, and she left and went to Byers Dowdy.
Well, I'll tell you how. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I
But
was
we
just gonna-
stayed there. I guess we stayed there in Lebanon until about. I guess we must have left about 86.
Well,
And both transferred to Metro.
we were probably there, at least crossed paths some of the time, but just a name drop, if you'll allow me. One of my teachers at Byers Dowdy Elementary School was Mrs. Dowdy.
Okay. I remember Mrs. The Dowdies. I think she was gone by the time my wife got there.
Yeah, probably.
Mr. I'm trying to think who the principal was. Who was there when she was there?
Mr. Wyatt,
Mrs.
maybe?
Winfrey was Mrs. I can't remember. Mrs. Winfrey, I know, was the secretary there.
Cordell Winfrey was the principal for several years.
Well, he had gone on to become the superintendent when my wife, actually, Mr. Dowdy was there when I was hired, then Mrs. Winfrey became superintendent. Mrs. Winfrey was the secretary at Byers Dowdy, and he was the superintendent when my wife went there.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember, I cannot think of his name. I cannot think of the principal seems like I don't know, seemed like his first name was Kenneth, but I can't even think. Watts. Mr. Watts was the principal there at Byers Dowdy when my wife was there.
Okay.
The entire time. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think everybody's back. Right? We're going to get off this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, it's always great to catch up on the old days. I went to an event Saturday, and years ago, I did student teaching at Cannon County High School in Woodbury, Tennessee. And I saw the gentleman that I student taught under and got to spend some time talking to him and his wife. He's been retired for several years. So it's always good to catch up and see folks from the past and make those connections. It's always exciting. Let's get back into it, and we will finish at 8 o'clock tonight. And the material that we don't finish tonight, I'll just add on to next week because I don't know that we'll get through it all, but that's fine. We'll get it in during this section or the next. But going back just to cover the steps of main motion again, because like I said, this is one of the most important things that I would like for you all to be able to take away from our time together is how to handle a main motion and recognize all these parts to it. But a main motion, again, brings that new, fresh idea in front of the group for us to discuss and to take action on. So a member would rise and address the chair by saying, Mr. Chairman, and gain recognition from the chair. That's where I would say, Amy, or Miss, is it Campoli? Or Madam Speaker. And then at that point, when I address that person, they have the floor. They have the opportunity to talk, so they can make their motion. I move that we have a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital on April the 27th. And then someone would say, I second the motion. If they don't immediately say it, I could ask, is there a second to the motion? This is another key component. If no one else really likes that main motion, and they're all just sitting there with a blank stare on their face and no one says, I second the motion, does anyone know what happens to that motion at that point? Then that motion will not be discussed by the group. We say that it dies from lack of support. So if a motion does not receive a second, and this is a motion that would require a second, and I ask, is there a second to the motion? I may even ask again, just because I might not have heard and I want to be sure. Is there a second to the motion? And as I'm scanning the crowd, I see no one that's making a movement or saying, hey, I second the motion. Then I would say as chairman, that motion dies from lack of support. And then we just move to the next item on the agenda. So if we do receive the second, then I would restate the motion. It's been moved and seconded that we have a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital on April the 27th. This motion is debatable and amendable. Is there any discussion? We'll go through all the discussion, following all the rules we've just covered. When discussion is exhausted and no one else is speaking, I would say, hearing no further discussion, we will proceed to vote. All those in favor of the motion that we have a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital on April the 27th, please say aye. All opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Yes, Robert.
I apologize, but just to clarify, I've been in meetings before where a member makes a motion that we call for the question when effectively they want discussion to stop. Where do we stand on that?
When we get into our subsidiary motions, there's a motion called previous question. And it requires a 2/3 vote. That is a very common thing that happens. It's one of my pet peeves because I'm ready to vote because I'm hungry and I want to go to lunch. I just start yelling, question. I call the question. That doesn't stop debate for the whole group just because you want to. We can put it to a vote, but you've got to be appropriate and say, I move the previous question. And that's one of the things that I've taken some exception to in some of the meetings that I've been a part of as a member, when people just start blurting out question, because they want to go ahead and push their idea through, hoping that it will pass quickly. And I've stood up and said, that's not appropriate. And I'll be glad to explain to the group why it's not if the chairman cannot. But if you're taking away my right to speak, then that requires a vote of action from the group. And there's a appropriate motion called the previous question. And we'll remind me, we'll get into that when we talk about that motion, because that is one of the common things that you see that you all need to be, tooled with so you can know how to handle that. Very good question about the question. And there's my main motion example that we had a bake sale fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Let's look at some of our motions. For those of you who received in the mail from me, the list of motions and ranking motions. If we were in person, we'd get up and we'd gather around the room and have some cute little cutouts with military ranks. And I'm not a military man, but I think we're all familiar enough with the military to know a few things about it. For example, they have different ranks of the soldiers in the military. The highest rank in the U.S. Army is called the General of the Army. He's got 5 stars, or she has 5 stars on their shoulder. They are the top of the line. What's at the bottom of the line? That first year enlisted, just got out of basic training, called a private first class. They have different designations that go on their uniform, so everybody else in the military knows who outranks someone else. Somewhere in the middle falls a corporal. So those are the 3 that I put up for us to use as an example. And the reason why I like to use the military example, if all 3 of these walked into a room, which one would be saluted? The general. Who would get to speak first if they all 3 wanted to speak about something? The general. Does the private understand that they can't speak unless no one else is talking? Yes, because they're in the military and they understand this. So I like to relate these to our ranking motions. So a private first class is a main motion. It's the lowest ranking motion. It can only speak when no one else in the room is speaking. Now, the General of the Army is the highest ranking motion. So as we look at our privileged motions, the highest ranking motion of all motions in existence is the motion called the fixed time to which to adjourn. So the motion to fix the time to which to adjourn is the General of the Army. That sort of makes sense as we go through this? All right. Oops. So here are our classes of motions. Let's look at the privileged motion section. There are 5 privileged motions, and these are ranked from top to bottom. The fix the time to which to adjourn. Then we have a motion called adjourn. I'm sure you're all familiar with that one. Recess, raise a question of privilege, and call for the orders of the day. Now in the, did y'all get them in the mail? Give me a thumbs up if you got the book in the mail. Yeah. Now, again, that's one that hopefully you can read through. And Amy, did you show me that one that you had that one? You don't have that one?
No, I had, it was a parliamentarian book, American parliamentarian. It's like $20 on Amazon or something.
Gotcha. And there are other parliamentary books out there that aren't Robert's Rules of Order. There's a lot of them that are good, but most assemblies will have in their bylaws that they follow Robert's Rules of Order. And if they do, then that's their, go-to reference. The one I'm mailed to those of you that had your address, and the ones I don't, I'll mail it to you whenever you send me your address, but it's called Robert's Rules of Order in Brief. And it just describes some situations and how to handle it, how to handle debate, and how to handle amendments. But in that book, it references the big 700-page book. It will tell you what page to go to the big book and find that on if you want more description. So it's pretty handy in that. It's a pretty elementary version of Robert's Rules of Order to help you get through some particular motions that are the most common. So if you like to read, it might be a good resource for you just to read and kind of get familiar with some things. And it can bridge you into how to look up things in the big book. That Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, the 11th edition is the most current. And if you want to pick one of those up, they're less than $15. They're like 10, 12 bucks, off of an online bookstore. And if we were in person, I would, maybe help access one for you because I've got a couple laying around, but I knew I could mail you the small one. The big one's kind of heavy and doesn't fit in an envelope. But if you're really into it and you're leading some groups, I would recommend that you go ahead and get the big book so you can reference it and look up some things along the way. And I also sent out a list of motions because the small book I mailed you didn't have a list in the middle. Robert's Rules of Order, the big book, does have that list in several places in the book, but this is what I mailed to you. And when I'm leading a meeting, I'll even have my little cheat sheet up at my desk with me, just to be sure that I'm on task. And this tells me my list of motions, how they're ranked. Can they interrupt a speaker? Do they require a second? Is it debatable, and can it be amended? And then the vote required. It's a very handy reference sheet, so you don't have to memorize all this. And as chairman, Robert, if we have someone that wants to move that previous question, I can look across the table there and know that they cannot interrupt a speaker to do that. They have to get recognition from the chair, wait their turn. And this motion does require a second. It cannot be debated, and it cannot be amended. And it requires a 2/3 vote. So that's why this little ranking sheet that I mailed to you is real handy. And again, I don't have to flip out my big book and look all that up. I've got that right there. So here is, again, our list of ranking motions. It starts at the top and works its way down, because these are the 13 ranking motions. They're grouped as privileged, subsidiary, and then the main motion is in a separate category. So the motion to fix the time to which adjourn is the 5-star general. So let's take a look at this privilege, at our list of privileged motions. I'll go through them fairly quickly and just give some examples and description about them. A lot of these you don't see on a regular basis, so you may not want to, try to memorize any of this. There's a few that you will see more common, and I'll try to mention those to you, the ones you might see on a more common basis, so you can be familiar with how to handle those. The motion to fix the time to which adjourn. What that motion does is it's not concerned anything about the business at hand. It sets when we're going to adjourn to. So if we don't have a regular meeting scheduled, or if this meeting's going to go long, if we're in a 3-day conference or something like that, I might make the motion to fix the time to which to adjourn, that when we adjourn until Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And that's when our next meeting will be. You don't see this very often. Again, it's more often in those multi-day meetings, like a conference that might be 3 days long or something like that. But if it is moved, when something else is on the floor, we handle this immediately. This is our #1 topic. So when it comes to the floor, it's the 5-star general. He gets to speak. We get to handle that first. As we move down the line, there it is. That's what I just said about it. All right, the motion to adjourn. This is one that we need to be familiar with. We see this at the end of every meeting. The motion to adjourn is a privileged motion. It can be made when any other thing is pending except for the motion above it, the fixed time to which to adjourn. Outside of that one, anytime during the meeting, someone can make the motion to adjourn. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the end of the meeting. It ends the meeting legally. As soon as we vote on the motion to adjourn, if it passes, this meeting is over and we can have no other business taking place. So it does close the meeting immediately. Now, it typically is made at the end, but there are instances where it's used as a tool to get their way. And I'll give an example. There was a county school board that had to discuss the budget, and they were in their last month before the state came in to take over. When they don't have a budget passed, the state will come in and take over your finances. They started the meeting, and the first thing that came up, someone stood up and moved to adjourn. And they voted to adjourn, and they finished their meeting before they ever did anything. So I guess they weren't prepared to talk about the budget, but it's neither here nor there. But that officially ended their meeting, and no other business took place that night. The next privileged motion is the motion to recess. This is one that you're familiar with. It's a short intermission. It does not close the meeting. It usually has a time attached to it. And when it's over, that's when we come back and we pick up business exactly where we were at before it was interrupted with the recess. If it does get voted to pass, we recess immediately. So for example, if we're on our main motion that we're going to buy a red car and we're having great discussion about we should have a red car, we should not buy a red car, and someone stands up and makes a motion to recess for 10 minutes, we immediately go into the merits of the motion to recess. And if I look at my cheat sheet, I see that it cannot be debated. We can't talk about whether we should recess or not, but it can be amended. And the purpose is it has a time limit attached to it. So if I make a motion to recess for 10 minutes, you might think that's too long. So as chairman, I would say the motion has been made and seconded that we take a 10-minute recess. This motion is not debatable, but it is amendable. Are there any amendments to be offered? Hearing none, we will proceed to vote. Or someone might want to amend it to make it a 15-minute break. If the motion to recess for 10 minutes passes, as chairman, I would say the motion passes, we will be recessed for 10 minutes. We will rejoin our session 10 minutes from now. When we come back in 10 minutes, we're back in the middle of that discussion where we left talking about the main motion to buy a red car. Make sense? We didn't end the meeting. We just took a short intermission. Oops. The next one is a question of privilege. It's a motion brought up for immediate consideration. It may be to secure comfort, convenience, the rights or privileges of the group or individual. Let me see if I've got a good example in my notebook here. This is one that you might get from time to time. And you may not know how to handle it because you might not know what it's called. And we might even talk about this last week. This is one that does not require a vote. This is one where a member would just simply rise and say, Mr. Chairman, and I would say, Madam Speaker. The screen is very difficult for us to see from the back. Could the lighting be adjusted so everyone in the room may be able to see the screen? As chairman, I could say, yes, thank you. Your point is taken well. Could we have the IT person please come and try to adjust the screen so that everyone could see it well? Or it could be a meeting where it's really, really cold in there and we don't have control of the thermostat. I might raise to a question for Mr. Chairman, Madam Speaker, it is very, very cold and uncomfortable in here. We're going to be here for a while. Could we please get the thermostat adjusted? As chairman, I could say, yes. Could we please have maintenance? Could the secretary please call the maintenance individual to come and adjust the comfort level of the room? So question of privilege is something along those lines. This could be one where we appeal the decision of the chair also. So if I'm hot-natured and I like the cold room and everybody else in there is freezing, and I say, no, the temperature is just fine, we will proceed with the meeting. Someone else could say, Mr. Chairman, I appeal the decision of the chair. And then we could put that to a vote because this was a chair ruling, so we could appeal that decision and go through it that way. Call for the orders of the day. This one is a little confusing to understand, but it does have some merit. The orders of the day basically are the agenda of our meeting. And obviously, if we have an agenda, that's the order that we should follow our business meeting and be taking up those items one at a time. And in some situations, whether the fault of the chairman on purpose or perhaps not, we might have skipped some items, or the chairman might have skipped them on purpose because they didn't really want to address them. If we know that it was an error on purpose, we could call for the orders of the day. And basically what that is saying is that we're going to follow the agenda that's already given. And as president or chairman, you're not following the agenda. So the group, we are trying to correct you on that issue. Now, sometimes it could be something simple like, Mr. Chairman, you neglected item 6 on the agenda. Oh, I apologize. We will pick that up right now. But if it's one of those where the chairman was hurriedly trying to get through a meeting and skipping several items, we might call for the orders of the day. And this one requires what's called a 2/3 negative vote on that. So meaning 2/3 of the people would have to vote to not follow the orders of the day and continue doing what the chairman's doing. So it gets kind of confusing on the vote of this one, but it's not one you would see real often. So those are the 5 privileged motions. Oops, we already had a break. All right. Fixed time to which to adjourn, recess, raise a question of privilege, call for the orders of the day. Now, if one is above the other, that means it outranks it, just like the general outranks the corporal and the private. We're not going to go through these scenarios. We'll go through one. Works better if we have people read. Let's see. Oh, that's the one I just gave. Okay, we'll just skip through those because that's the one I gave. All right. The next classification of motions are called subsidiary motions. Subsidiary motions, there are 7 of them. They're also ranked motions. So the one on the top called lay on the table, it is the highest ranking subsidiary motion. The one down at the bottom is called postpone indefinitely. It is the lowest ranking of the subsidiary motions. So these go with the same premise as the privilege motions. The one at the top is the most important. If it is on the floor, it gets the attention before the ones below it. Subsidiary motions may be applied to another motion for the purpose of modifying it, delaying action, or disposing of it. They're always made after the main motion to which they would apply. They must be voted or debated and voted on before the group resumes their debate back on the original main motion that they are being applied to. Again, they are prioritized or ranked. So the one at the top, lay on the table, is the highest ranking, and they work their way down the list. So let's take a look at these. And this is the group that you will see more than any of the others, subsidiary motions, because these help dispense with or take care of the main motion. So you'll want to be familiar with these 7 and just the purpose behind them, I guess. And again, you could always have your cheat sheet to know if it requires a second, if it's debatable, if it's amendable, those type things. So let's look at lay on the table. The purpose of the motion to lay on the table means an item of business is being passed temporarily so the assembly may handle a more urgent matter. The motion to lay on the table does not set a time at which the motion will be brought back up. The intent of the motion to lay on the table is not to kill the main motion or to make it go away, but it's only to set it aside in such a way that it may be easily resumed later on. However, if it is not taken from the table at this meeting or the next scheduled meeting, it would essentially die at the end of that next meeting. As long as the motion is laid on the table, it's still in the group's control, so no other motion on that subject can be brought in front of the group until this original motion is handled that is on the table. It's also out of order to move to lay a motion on the table if there is no matter that appears to be urgent in front of the group. So you can't just move to lay it on the table just because you want to. It will be an example that, so for example, during this, let me give you a scenario. during discussion of a main motion that we buy a red car, the group has just learned that our group treasurer has been admitted to the hospital. So that the assembly may adopt a motion to send the treasurer flowers in the hospital, we're going to lay this motion on the table. Does that make sense? We're still talking about the red car, and somebody's just received a message that our treasurer's in the hospital. So we want to send some flowers to the hospital. So we're going to move to lay on the table the motion to buy a red car so we can work on sending flowers to the treasurer. And we can then move to take that motion from the table at this meeting or the next meeting. You see people use this motion a lot with the intent of trying to make something go away. That is incorrect. So as chairman, if you know that someone is just trying to basically kill the motion or to table it or to put it on the table or lay it on the table, and their intent is to just make it go away or to die, then as chairman, you should rule them out of order and let them know that the motion to lay on the table is only used in the instance of where we have an emergency, urgent matter that has come up that we need to handle. And if there's no obvious emerging matter, then the motion to lay on the table would be out of order. It does require a second. There is no discussion and it cannot be amended. So we would immediately take a vote. So during the discussion of the motion to buy a red car, someone says, Mr. Chairman, I move that we lay that on the table. I would say, is there a second? I received the second. The motion has been made and properly seconded to lay on the table the motion to buy a red car. This motion is not debatable, is not amendable. Therefore, we will vote immediately. All those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. If it passes, then the motion is on the table. Everybody good with that one? Again, you see that one a lot. Here's Robert's previous question. It's the second highest ranking subsidiary motion. This is used to bring the assembly to an immediate vote on the pending motion. Typically, it's a main motion, but it could be on any motion that has discussion or is able to be amended. What this means is we are no longer going to have discussion or amendments, and we're going to an immediate vote. So basically, we are stopping the discussion. Now, as a member of the group, I have a right to talk how many times? Twice on each motion. For how long? 10 minutes. If someone in your group just starts yelling question, question because they want to stop, that doesn't stop. You're taking away the rights of the membership, who everyone has the opportunity to speak twice for 10 minutes on each votable motion. If you're doing that, you should only do it through the previous question. So Robert, back to your example. If someone during discussion of the red card just starts yelling question, question, when it's obvious there are people who are still wanting to speak, you can handle it one of two ways, depending on how much this person has already gotten on your nerves during this meeting. You could simply say, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, but you are out of order. There is no motion to move the question or whatever they're trying to say. Or you could be helpful to them as a chairman and say, Mr. Speaker, are you trying to make the motion to move the previous question? And to help prod them along the way. If they say yes, then you would say, well, then you may make the motion to move the previous question if that's what you are desiring to do. It does require a second. It is not debatable because this is the motion to end debate. So therefore, this motion is not debatable. It is not amendable. And we would vote. A motion that takes away members' rights typically requires a 2/3 votes. So we're taking away the rights of the membership to speak. So this would require 2/3 to pass. So if we've got, 6 people that voted for it and 4 people that voted against it, then it fails because it did not receive 2/3. If we've got 8 people that voted for it and 3 people that voted against it, then it would pass. The way you figure out a 2/3 vote is you can double the negative number. So 8 for and 3 against would be an 8 versus 6 vote. 6 for and 4 against, we double that back number of 4, make it 8. So it would fail. So you just have to figure out your math when you do that. And again, it's the people who vote. And anytime we have a 2/3 vote, we're going to take a counted vote, not a voice vote, because you cannot tell 2/3 out of a majority. So we need a counted vote, and the only votes that are counted are those who actually vote. So if there's 100 people in the room and only 20 of them vote, we're going to go based on the 20 that voted, because some people may just not choose to raise their hand or vote. So only the counted votes are the ones that we use in making the decision if a motion passes or fails. And then if the motion to move the previous question does pass by a 2/3 vote, we go back to the main motion and we would say, since the motion to move the previous question has passed, all debate is now ended on the main motion. Therefore, we will go to an immediate vote. All those in favor of buying a red car, raise your hand. Another one that sort of goes along with what we were discussing earlier about limit or extending limits of debate. 2 methods. We could reduce the number or length of speeches permitted or set a time that it closes. So if we know this is going to be a long topic, we could vote to say, instead of 10 minutes, let's cut it down to 5 minutes. Or that debate will close at 8 o'clock on this topic. Something like that. Or we could extend it to, hey, we want everybody to have 20 minutes each time they talk. Or they get to talk 3 times. So basically you are extending debate on this particular main motion. It does require a second. It is not debatable, and it can be amended, obviously as to the time. And it also takes a 2/3 vote to pass, because we could potentially be, taking away our rights to have discussion. Postpone to a certain time, or postpone definitely is the way I learned it. This is the act of delaying the pending question within limits to a definite day, meeting, hour, or until after a certain event. So this is different from laying on the table. When we laid something on the table, we don't know when it's coming back off the table until we vote to take it off the table. Postpone definitely. Let's say we're talking about having a summer picnic. And during discussion of the talk to have a summer picnic, we're not sure if we can go to the campground we want to go to. That's come up during our discussion. So we might want to postpone this till next month's meeting to give us some time to call the campground to find out if they're going to be open or if we can reserve the cabin, something like that. So if we're on a motion to have a summer picnic and during that discussion, we have revealed that we may not know if we can reserve the campground we want, someone could say, Mr. Chairman, I move to postpone this till our April meeting. And if that's the case and it passed, then this item would go on the agenda for that April meeting or to whenever we send it to. And usually it's because we need to get some more facts on the main motion itself before we can make a decision. But whatever time that we send it to, and it could be if it's one of those 3-day meetings that this topic, I move to postpone this until 12 noon on Thursday. At 12 noon on Thursday during our business meeting, this automatically would come up. Make sense? It goes to a certain time and it's going to automatically be on that agenda and come up. And it does say within limits. There are some limits to, how many months or how many forward meetings you can postpone it, that type thing. Commit or refer. I learned this one as refer to a committee. We have a lot of standing committees, special committees in organizations that do a lot of work. And it's useful at times to send an item to a committee to discuss it. So if we're having the topic of buying our red car, and during the discussion, we reveal that we don't know if we have enough money to buy a red car in our treasury. So it might be useful if the budget committee took a look at the different kind of cars that we could afford to buy. So if that was a big point of discussion, someone might want to make a motion that we refer this to the budget committee and that they bring us back a report at next month's meeting. So the motion to refer or commit, it does take a second. It is debatable and amendable. So if that was the case that happened and we voted to refer the item to the budget committee, they would bring us back that report at our next meeting like they were instructed. And that motion will be gone for this meeting until it was brought back out of committee. You see that one quite a bit. Things get sent to a committee. And this is through a motion with the group voting on it. Motion to amend. This is the most popular subsidiary motion of all. Amend is to change something. We talked about it earlier. I think y'all are probably pretty familiar with this one. We see it in a lot of organizations. It is, well, it does require a second. It is debatable and it is also amendable. Now we can only have a second degree amendment at one time. That might get a little confusing, but it usually doesn't go that far. But on our red car motion, if we have the motion to purchase a red car, and during discussion, there's a lot of folks that really don't like the color red. They would rather have a blue car. So someone might move to amend the motion by changing the word red to blue. If that motion received a second, then we would have discussion and debate and the potential for an amendment on the motion to amend. So as chairman, I would say the motion has been made and seconded that we strike out the word red and insert the word blue to the original main motion. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend? We might have some discussion. Once that's over, I would ask for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to amend by striking out the word red and inserting the word blue, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. If the motion to amend passes, then that changes that original main motion to whatever the amendment said. So now we would be back in discussion of the original main motion that now reads, and as chairman, I would state that after the motion to amend passes, I would say we're now back to discussion of the original main motion as amended, which states that we buy a blue car. Is there any further discussion on this main motion? And then that motion could be amended again. Somebody could vote to, I don't want a blue car, I think it should be green. You could go on infinitely. But we do see a lot of amendments, especially with time, money, different things like that, dates. And then the final subsidiary motion is the motion to postpone indefinitely. This is a motion that the group really doesn't want to take a position on the question. It is different from the motion to postpone definitely, because when we postpone something definitely, it went to a certain time. The motion to postpone indefinitely does not go to a certain time. It basically goes into infinity and it's not dealt with. It's a way to kill a motion without actually voting on the motion. So it does require a second. It can be debated. It cannot be amended because we can't amend it to, for example, bring it back at our next meeting. An example of this might be the reason you might want to do this where a group doesn't want to take a stance on an issue could be dealing with money. Perhaps we've donated money to the children's hospital in the past and somebody's brought up a motion that we give $1,000 to the children's hospital. Well, during discussion, we realized that we really don't have a lot of money in our treasury and that's the best cause in town is to give the children's hospital. So we don't want to really vote no on that motion because it makes us look bad as an organization because we voted not to give money to the children's hospital. So instead of, voting no against that, someone might move to postpone it indefinitely. And if that motion to postpone indefinitely passes, then that motion just sort of goes away and we did not take action on it. So we're not going to give $1,000 to the Children's Hospital. And we also didn't vote to give them $1,000. So it helps the group make a decision without basically hurting feelings or making the motion go away. So those are the subsidiary motions in order of rank. Now we'll pick up next week with the incidental motions. We'll go through some of those. We are going to go through electronic meetings. We're going to talk about some unclassified motions. There's just a few more motions that we're going to go through to explain. There are a lot more motions in Robert's Rules of Order, but we're not going to touch on all of them. These are just the most frequently used ones that you would see in some of your groups. And I wanted you to be familiar with some of them and how they work. And the next group is called incidental motions. Then we have some unclassified motions. We're also going to talk about committees next time. And we're going to talk about, as I mentioned, e-meetings, electronic meetings, and how those should be handled. And we'll talk about bylaws, constitutions, organizational structures, and just some other things to wrap up our time together. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we finish up tonight?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Between now and next meeting, I would like to investigate further training or opportunities. Do you have any threads or hints you could give me a little guidance?
I do not, but I'll look into some.
Is this, like somebody said earlier, this is the first class like this I've ever seen, and it seems valuable to me, and I would hope there's others.
Great. Well, this, and as I mentioned last week, this spawned out of our UT Extension Leadership Development Group. And we taught several agents across Tennessee as a train the trainer course. And I took the lead in that because of my background with parliamentary procedure, and we did several other topics with it. But we identified that as a focus area in the state of Tennessee as a need, that it is difficult to find training in this topic from others. So that's why it's there. And this is the sort of a test pilot for me. This is the first time I've done it over Zoom. And usually it's one of those things we teach in high school to some of our kids in some of those leadership organizations, but with a group of adults, I was excited to have you all in here to get it going. And, in the future, I might do some more advanced courses through UT Extension or through National Community Education partnering with us if we have folks who are interested. And so absolutely, but I'll look and see, but there's not a lot out there, Robert. So hopefully y'all will benefit some from this. And I'll go ahead and put this session also up on YouTube and send y'all the link just in case you want to refer back and look at it and that sort of thing. But I do appreciate y'all being on here with me tonight and your participation, and hopefully you're getting a thing or two. And if you haven't sent me your address, do that, and I'll mail you out a book between now and next meeting, hopefully, and we'll go from there. So y'all have a great week.
Thanks,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Thank you.
Good session. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.